Okay. We'll give a couple of minutes for people to join us. And we'll start in 1 second, a couple of minutes. And you're at your home in Tel Aviv. Where are you now?
Yeah, I'm in Israel, at home.
At home. Okay, so
even though that the background looks like I'm skiing, which I really would like to do right now, but I'm not.
Yeah. So while people are joining us, I will open this conversation. I'm very excited to be here today with Uri Levine, co-founder of Waze. And like I like to say, you don't know that, Uri. I say that only in videos I don't share with you. I'm saying Uri Levine is the kind of guy that disrupts whatever it is that can be disrupted, starting with Waze. And I don't know if you disturb your neighbors as well, but this any sector out there. That is very interesting. So basically, this series of discussions is me speaking with phenomenal people, first generation, second generation of amazing families and entrepreneurs. That the story is basically that they all never stopped at no, they all dealt with challenges, they all dealt with crisis before, and they never stopped. People that could have, all of the people I speak to, Anthony Scaramucci, Tal Carrot from Silverstein, Dov Moran, Spielberg, all these families could have stopped working ages ago, and none of these people actually stopped for a minute. They all work 24/7, and that's the kind of people we want to speak with. And I'm bringing people from different sectors. And today I'm here with Uri Levine, co-founder of Waze, whom I'm very fortunate to know for quite a while. He spoke at many of our conferences in London, in the US. Exciting person, and I'm very happy to be here. So good morning for me, good afternoon for you, Uri. I'm in New York, you're in Israel. And there's so many things we want to ask today. Finally, we have Uri, and not in his normal mode, which means that I can ask him questions that normally you wouldn't get to when he tells his story. So that's going to be interesting. So first of all, Uri, we're dealing with a crazy, unheard of before crisis that affects everybody. I know it affected you personally. So if you can share your thoughts about, how you're dealing with what's going on and your thoughts about this whole thing.
So I have gray hair, which means that I've been here long enough to see crises before. And one of the most important things is that when we look at crisis or we look at the threat, there is another side of it, which is the opportunity. And always ask yourself, okay, so where is the opportunity, right? What is going to change, and what can be changed as a result of that? Now, the human being went through multiple crises over the history, and always came up on top. And the reality is that this crisis, or this, for a second, I would call that the overinflated, PR-fed coronavirus, is overinflated, results into overinflated or into a real crisis, real economic crisis, where people stuck at home, some of the businesses will be unable to exist, some of the businesses will fail during their funding phases. And we are likely to see this crisis last for a couple of years. But at the end of it, there will be more opportunities. And if you ask yourself, is the world going to spin again? Yes, absolutely. Can we expect the world to become better and greater in a couple of years from now? Absolutely, yes. What does it mean in the short term? Every business will need to analyze what does it mean for him, right? And in some cases, some of my companies are actually enjoying a tailwind, a pretty significant tailwind that helps them to, that the coronavirus actually put them in a better position than before.
And how do you see the world affected by what's going on these days. I mean, it's way worse than 9/11 in the fact that it's happening, you know, in so many different places at the same time, and it's so long, and you don't even know what's, you know, the implications. Chapter 11s. How do you see that affecting?
So let's look at how the world will change, right? And we need to ask ourselves, what is short term and what is long term, right? So if you're dealing with short term, then maybe selling masks is a good idea. And obviously, if you are in travel business that nearly stops, or your business that are arranging or organizing events, there are no events right now, right? And so this is pretty much global syndrome, but it will be back, right? And so obviously, if your business is being hurt because of the current situation, then Darwin said it's not the strongest to survive, it's the fastest to adapt, right? The one that adapt the better way. And so we all need to adapt into the new situation in terms of maybe reducing the burn rate, maybe assuming that this is going to take a longer period of time and prepare for that. But this is something that is going to come back. Right? The other side of it is that, are there businesses that are not going to happen, right? Are we going to stop, or is the human being behavior going to change in such a way that we will not be hugging and kissing a year from now? Now, if not, then we might have different problems, right? If social distancing will remain as a normal behavior, then we do have a challenge. Some of the things that we have discovered during this pandemic is the Zoom, right, or the video conferencing. The fact is that we are right now conducting video conferencing, and most of the businesses today that can are actually being managed through video conferencing. So what does it mean in terms of working from home or remote workforce, right? And assume that this is over tomorrow morning, right? And by the way, some countries, it's actually going to be over next week, right? So they will decide to go into normal life. And probably within the month of May, most of the countries will start to go back to normal, including Israel, including many countries in Europe, including and possibly some states in the US, and maybe in the US it will last a little bit longer. But then you ask yourself, okay, wait a minute, we actually had a couple of months of working from home and it turns out to be pretty good. So why not to keep that? I already have some of my CEOs telling me when we are back to normal, I'm actually going to have 3 days working from the office and 2 days working from home. I have another CEO telling me, okay, I actually examined the things during this couple of months, and this team is going to work 4 days from home and 1 day at the office, and this team is actually going to work the other way around, right? 4 days from the office and 1 from home. So obviously, we, in terms of remote working, we change our behavior, and this is pretty significant, right? And this is not the only change, right? So ask yourself, how many people have went and did online purchasing for the first time during this couple of months, right? And this is probably hundreds of millions, maybe even billions, and possibly they have learned that this is not that bad, right? It's actually a good idea. And so is this going to change the behavior? Probably yes. Is online retail going to become better after the corona? Yes. Is that going to last? Yes. Is there a derivative of that? Absolutely yes. Logistics, right? So logistics is logistics industry is going to become much more significant, and this is pretty good. This is something that we need to remember. And this is something that I think that we should all consider what is going to change over the longer period of time. Now, I would estimate that maybe 25 of the businesses, in particular the small businesses, will not survive the crisis, right? So just imagine that this is the level of revenues that you have before Corona, and you drop to nearly zero. Right? So if you're in travel business, you're probably approaching that. If you are in event organizing business, this is what you experience, right? If you have a restaurant, this is what you experience. If you are New York Knicks, this is what you experience, right? So revenues dropping to zero or close to zero, and if you don't adapt fast enough to have your cost at the same level, then you might be running out of cash. And so the situation that your revenues drops dramatically, you don't adapt fast enough the burn rate that you have, and you don't have enough cash in hand, you will die.
Of course, you need to adopt the burn rate, and many are, either laying off people. Some countries help. I know in Israel, for instance, all employees can go on the country's benefits, and which takes a lot of toll out. But I don't think in New York, for instance, they've done that. I mean, I don't think they had that solution there. So it's different solutions in different places. But I also assume that, many entrepreneurs don't know what to do. I mean, even commitments that they had probably are not, some of them will not, they cannot do anything with. And many startup companies, what are they supposed to do? How are they going to navigate that? Those that don't have the deep pockets, probably many will not, but what would you advise them? What are you seeing there?
So this is, and we have seen this during the 2008 crisis and during the 2001 crisis, and actually maybe even, or at least I read about it in the 1983 crisis and so forth. So what happened is that it's becoming more challenging to raise capital, right? And in many cases, even commitment are being withdrawn, right? So people are basically saying, I don't want to invest right now. And just imagine that, many of us have lost a lot of money on the paper in the stock market, right? And so all of a sudden, saying that I allocate maybe 5% of my wealth to invest in high risk, high return investments, all of a sudden I already lost 20% in the market, right? And so I already had my high risk in that sense. And so many investors tend to say, okay, let's wait and see, which, by the way, in many cases, it's not necessarily the right behavior. Cash is king during this period of time. So obviously you can find very, very good deals. In many cases for startups, the duration of fundraising lasts longer. And not only that, is that the valuations are much lower today. And all of a sudden, many of the startups become bigger rather than choosers. And if you're bigger, then what you get is what you get, right? And so I've seen down rounds, I've seen aggressive investment or opportunistic investment during this period of time, which also means for investors is that the market is actually pretty full with good opportunities. Now, if you would ask me what will be a good opportunity, then I would say, at the end of the day, companies that are actually good to invest at these days, companies that, and this is not about markets, right? So there are markets that I would say will experience high investments in the next decade or so. But the startups that I would say worthwhile to invest, those that are fast to adapt, because this is major behavior that we would like to see in companies that are able to adapt to new reality, right? And so those that were fast to adapt is actually something that is very interesting. Those that the CEO actually created, or to a certain extent, I would say, have demonstrated the ability to show perseverance, to show making decisions, to adapt fast, to lead, and those that already have reached product market fit, those will survive. Now, in many cases, I would say, because of this behavior, if you see this behavior, then the expectation is that these companies will become successful over time because of this behavior, right? So if they demonstrate the behavior, I would say they're very likely to become successful later.
And, speaking of adjusting, I mean, what you're seeing right now is us adjusting really. When we thought about the whole space, I saw all these webinars left and right. Personally, I thought they were boring as hell. Like everybody are repeating themselves, everybody are live, everybody has suddenly became talk show hosts. And then I thought, you know what, if we are ever going to do something here, it's got to be something different. And then I came up with this concept of speaking to exceptional people like you and inspiring people from different sectors. And this will, like every crisis we went through, whether it was personally or with the company, we always came with new things, which I think now this webinar thing will keep on going even when we're after this. So absolutely adjusting is a must. Otherwise you die or lose a lot of money.
You know, I will relate to that and say there are 46 participants in this webinar, right? I don't see them, right? I don't even know if they're with me or not. I have no clue, right? Which actually makes that very challenging for me in that sense. And I don't know if they care about what I'm saying, if this is interesting for them. If I would see them, right, then maybe it would be easier for me to adopt and during this conversation and become more relevant to them. But I hope I do.
I am sure you are here. Another question. You know, especially in your world, I mean, it's known that, you know, employees are going where the money is without a shame, right? The high-tech employees, they go and move from one company to another. It depends on how much you pay them. So nowadays, I want to see.
Wait a minute.
No?
Wait, I disagree with that.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that I disagree with that is that I live in Israel, and this is a key reason why I live in Israel and build my startups in Israel and not in the Silicon Valley, is the loyalty of the employees, right? So one of the biggest challenges in Silicon Valley in normal days is that if you hire 100 engineers today, and a year from now, maybe 70 will stay, maybe 60, right? So the attrition rate is around 35%. In Israel, if I would start a new startup today and hire 100 engineers, a year from now, still 97 of them will be engaged, right? And so the reality is that the loyalty in Israel is much higher than it is in the Silicon Valley. And as a result, I usually say that the ecosystem for startups in Israel is much better than the US. And during this period of time, people have harder time to find a job. Right?
So obviously, I'm saying there's going to be a change. And if once you went and you said, you know what, these guys offer me 20K more, maybe if you'll offer me 10K more, I'm here. In some cases, they will not come to you now and say to those companies in distress, hey, I heard this company is now laying off people and they took salaries down 30%, maybe take mine 20%. But there's going to be a change, at least for the next year, would you say, in this balance between employees in the tech section and others, of course, and the employers, which would make it maybe easier for startup companies and others when they come now to deal with that? Do you see?
So we can certainly think about readjustment of wages in the market, right? And this is going to be a general market change, right? And obviously, if there is less money, then this less money is going to be distributed with less people, and we are likely to see adjustment of salaries, of prices, and this could be through short-term incentive, long-term incentives, base salaries, whatever it is. But also take into consideration that many of the employees actually have, base salary and then bonus plan, right? And the likelihood of companies to actually meet their target for this year or next year is slim. And I think that we will see some of the adjustment like that. I can tell you that throughout my startups, then immediately that this crisis started, we ask ourselves, okay, are we in a market that is going to be affected dramatically? If yes, then we need to adjust dramatically. Are we in a market that is going to be affected much less, but we have limitations because of the ability to raise capital, then we should act accordingly? And are we in a market that is going to not even being affected or potentially even being accelerated the growth because of the crisis, then we should actually raise capital and invest more into building the business. And the most important part was to adapt fast, right? And if you haven't done that up until now in your company, then you have to do that, right? And you should think about, okay, this is short term. This is what I need to do right now in order to survive. And the longer term, and by the way, middle term, you need to assume, to ask yourself, okay, how long is going to be before market is back to normal? Right? And back to normal is not necessarily the numbers that we have seen in 2019, right? So let's say you are travel, then people will return to travel, right? And fly again, and nothing is going to change them. But first of all, it's going to be the business travelers, right? And then leisure travelers, and then maybe low-cost travelers. And so we will see that it will take a longer period of time for some of the markets to go to normal. I actually see one of the questions here asking, how long will it take? Assume that 2021 will be less than 2019, maybe 80% of that, maybe 70% in the markets that are being affected, right? In 2022, it's going to be back to normal. So whatever you thought that is going to happen this year is going to actually happen in 2022. So this is midterm, right? The long term is the key question that we need to ask ourselves: how markets will change, and this is based on change of behaviors of people, right? So one of the things that turned out in Israel very successful just before the corona is the on-demand scooters, right? So Bird and Lime and companies like that showed up with their electric scooters everywhere, right? And now I'm speaking with people and they're saying, okay, wait a minute, I don't want to ride a scooter that someone was on this scooter before me and I don't know who this person was, right? And as a result, I'm saying, okay, if this is the case, then I'm going to buy my own, right? So this is changing behavior. We will see in mobility as well, right? So it's unclear that people are willing to take Uber the same way that they did before. And if this is the case, if they are not willing to do that, then maybe Uber will find themselves having a sort of a dedicated driver per person or dedicated drivers for a group of person, and we've seen changes in mobility. Logistics is going to be a huge market in the future. Anything that has to do with medical and healthcare is going to change dramatically, and we are likely to see much bigger investments, governmental investments in all the countries, covering up for the unreadiness that we have experienced in the next 5, 7, 10 years, right? So budgets are going to become dramatically bigger in this space.
So he's saying healthcare, just like after 9/11, it was security, going to be
exactly. Exactly. And in Israel, that was exactly the same thing that we have experienced after the 73 war, right? So all of a sudden, a decade of major investments in security, and this event is traumatic in the same order of magnitude as a war, right? And so, however, if you think about the big war, right? So World War II, and you ask yourself, so what happened after that? Baby boomers, right? So, and this is the interesting part, right? So the human being have this nature, right? If we are under stress, then we condense and we try to survive. Once we are out of this stress, we are actually saying, okay, so we survived that, so nothing is going to happen to us, and we are in an authoria type of behavior, and we are likely to see expansions, dramatic expansions in many areas. Part of it is actually reproduction, right? So we should expect a lot of new babies in the next 9 months, right? Or in 9 months from now. And as a result of that, if you are in this business, then you should expect significant growth for babies and then toddlers and then kids and so forth over the next 10 years.
And when this crisis started, I called you, going to how it affected you, and even before things before people understood what was going on, you were quarantined. You came from, I think, Switzerland or Europe. You landed in Israel, and you never sounded alarmed. So I wanted to ask you personally. I mean, how do you also find what the different countries did with the corona? Do you feel they did too much? That it's a flu that's been overrated? Do you feel that they took the right steps, or stopping the economy is too much and they went too far? Because you look to me calm all the time. You were never worried that you might die tomorrow or who knows.
So I actually did a little bit of analysis, but I think that in general, the important part is completely different, right? So the right question is to ask yourself, okay, assume that you knew that you would have the same knowledge as the president, right, or whoever is going to make the call at the beginning of March. What would you do differently, right? And the answer is that most likely nothing. And the reason is the political survivorship, right? So if you are going to shut down the economy, and after a couple of months it will turn out that it was successfully fighting the corona, then you will come out as a hero and I say, because of these extreme measures that I took, we fought the corona and we won, right? Okay, so this is one approach. If it wouldn't work, then you would say, even though that we have did all the extreme measures that we could, it was not enough, right? And this is tough luck. But if you'll do something else, and nothing would happen, then it's okay. But if something would happen, if the corona will end up to be as severe as it is, maybe as in New York, then you would be blamed as not taking enough measurements to protect the people, and you're most likely going to lose the next election, right? And so, and therefore, you can see that nearly all the countries did the same thing, right? So let's do lockdown, let's do social distancing, let's shut down airlines, urban mobility, events, hotels, restaurants, and so forth. And I think that this is, in the previous perspective, was the right decision. There was no other decision that would make sense. But if you look at the numbers today, here is the realization, right? This is what we know so far, and 85% of the people will not be affected by corona at all. Right? So it's not that they're going to have corona and nothing severe. They are not going to be affected. The same way that you think about, well, when is the last time that I had a flu, right? And not all the people get the flu. Some people actually have, their immune system is not accepting the flu or not being affected by the flu at all. So this is 85% of the population. Then you look at the rest of the 15 that will actually experience corona. Half of them will not even have symptoms. And the other half, 45% of them, will have very insignificant symptoms, the same way that they would have with a normal flu. Right? And so only 5% of the 15% are actually at risk. And of them, you will see that you at the end of the day, you look at people that actually died, and most of them died because of other complications, right? So if you are healthy and young, you shouldn't be worried at all. Right? If you are elder, if you are older person, and you have other disease or other syndromes, then you should take extra care. And more we realize that this is the situation, and this is why most of the countries are going back to normal. Now the challenge is unemployment rate. Unemployment rate in the US today, there are 30 million unemployed people. This is too much. Not all of them will have a way to go back. This is where we will need government intervention, even though that this is not the standard economic behavior of the US.
And okay, interesting. Now let's talk about what you're doing today and what you've done before, and maybe how did you end up in technology? Can you share with us, how it all started, and obviously you're known for Waze, but what happened before that?
Does it matter? You know, end of the day, look, everyone is using Waze. What does it matter what I did before? But I actually started my I would call that high-tech career or technology career during my military service. I was a software engineer there, and then I spent about 6 years at an elite intelligence unit as software developer. And after that, I remained a software developer at a company that called Converse, and which did the voicemail, right? And we don't remember that anymore because no one is using voicemail anymore. But at the time, there was a certain point of time that there were actually more than 1 billion people using the Converse voicemail. So I had more users using my first product than the Waze product. And by the way, even today, there are more people using Moovit than people using Waze. And I did that for some years, and after that, I switched into product marketing and business development and marketing and business and back and forth until I started my first startup 20 years ago. And since then, I'm in the startup scene, right? So I was part of the time helping startups, part of the time building my own. I think that the most interesting part of my career is actually after Waze. Right? So I left Waze the day after the acquisition, literally the day after the acquisition. So I can build more startups, and this is what I'm doing since then. And initially I was, finding the team, investing some money myself, guiding them, mentoring them, helping them to become, to figure out product market fit and so forth. And then over the years, I actually changed my model, and instead of doing that myself, I actually built sort of an investment club so people can co-invest with me. And in the last couple of years, I have my own investment vehicle that I'm investing in my startups through that. And the most important thing for me is that for me, the mission of changing the world and making it a better place is incomplete. So I keep on looking at big problems and that I'm trying to solve, and each one of them is trying to address a very specific problem that is a big problem. That if we solve that the world will become a better place. And some of them are in mobility, some of them in fintech, some of them in medical, in different places. And this is something that all of my startups, each one of them is trying to solve a single problem. I have, I would say, a philosophy, right? That in general, I'm saying I'm about to solve problems, right? This is my mission in life, and it's about doing good and doing well at the same time. And I have a common practice that I've used throughout all of my startups, and in a second I will mention some of them. It's always about the problem, the CEO, and the mentorship, and this is the combination of these three elements, and it's always these three elements, right? So if I look at the right CEO and the right problem, then I can actually say, okay, this one has a higher likelihood of being successful. If I can mentor them, then I simply increase the likelihood of being successful. And by doing that, I basically say, okay, now I'm interested. I'm interested because there is a place for me in creating value, right? And in solving the world. Otherwise, I would basically say, okay, this is awesome things to do. Let's let this company solve a problem and make the world a better place. But if there is no added value for me, then I'm not interested. And so you mentioned earlier people that keep on doing. This is what I keep on doing, right? Just to mention some of the startups, Moovit, that is like Waze but for public transportation, answering the same question that Waze does. How do I get from here to wherever I want to go right now, but using public transportation? Now, Moovit is actually growing faster than Waze at the rate of 1 million new users every day. Right, so you think of today, and by the end of the day, Moovit will have 1 million new users more than yesterday. FeeX, this is interesting. This is it's connected some dots, right? And it deals with, or it started with the biggest secret in the world: financial fees. Look at the US today, and there are about $700 billion of financial fees. And the scary part is that people don't know that they're paying them. Now, with this in mind, and I want to roll back into the previous crisis that we had, 2008, right? And we all remember that the markets lost quite a lot. And during 2008, beginning of 2009, I get my annual statement of my retirement plan, and I've lost 20% on the market. And in addition, paid 1.5% fees for losing money. Now, obviously, I was frustrated, but not because I was paying those fees, because I didn't know. So I started to ask all of my friends how much fees you are paying, and none of them knew. And for me, if no one knows, that's the definition of a secret. And as a result, I decided that I'm going to build a transparency platform, but I only built that after I left Waze in 2013. Now, we started with a transparency platform, but we ended up with becoming the tool for financial advisors to manage for their customers their 401k plans or held away accounts, right? So just imagine you have your 401k saving, which is in many cases a pretty significant part of your saving, and then you have your brokerage account, and you allow your financial advisor, you ask your financial advisor to manage your wealth, and you only give them part of it, which is the brokerage account, right? And so the FeeX platform enabled them to actually access the held away accounts, the 529s, the 401ks, the annuities, and so forth, and actually provide better service to their customers. And so not only the customers are getting better service, it's actually the financial advisor are able to provide a better service to their customers. So this is a FeeX. FairFly deals with maybe biggest secret in travel industry. What happened to airfare after you book your flight? Now, the reality is that no one knows because no one is comparing prices after they make the purchase decision. Airfare are going up and down all the time based on the demand for a specific flight. They're going up and down before you are making the reservation and also after you're making the reservation. So what FairFly does is actually monitor your own itinerary, and if the price drops, let's say this is the price that you paid and this is a cancellation fees. If price drops here, you're losing money. You're leaving money on the table. I don't like to leave money on the table. So we build another transparency platform to tell people that you can rebook the same flight at a cheaper price. Now you think about it from the individual perspective, but think about it from a corporate perspective. That travel budget is actually pretty significant, even though that today it drops to zero, but it will come back, right? And what if we can save you 5 to 10% of your travel budget? This is actually goes directly to the bottom line. This is quite significant. Let's speak about a couple of startups that are actually enjoying tailwind during the coronavirus. One of them is actually based in New York. This is Lifecare. And Lifecare, we started that as a smart medical alert system, but it evolved over time into the best platform for remote patient monitoring. Now, if we're speaking about social distancing and realization that we maybe want to prevent people from coming to the hospitals or come to the clinics, then the remote patient monitoring all of a sudden become pretty significant. Just imagine that you do your blood pressure and oxygen saturation level and different measurements that you're doing at home, and all of this information being directly forwarded to your doctor to do, in a reporting, in an alert system, and so forth. And they look at it on a monthly basis, and all of a sudden say, okay, wait a minute, over time your blood pressure is actually going up. There is something insignificant, or there is inconsistency in the blood pressure. Obviously, we are doing something wrong with the medical for that. Now, these days, Lifecare enjoys a very strong tailwind and experience, 10 times bigger orders than before. Another company that is experiencing very strong tailwind is Kahoon. Kahoon is medical knowledge system, and we basically say, okay, what if we can take the essence of the beginning was we can take all the medical knowledge in the world today that is based on text, right? Textbooks and text articles and so forth, and we can convert them into data. And with that, with data, we can do magical things, right? So one of the interesting things that we did recently is readapted that into Corona, and at more than 85% likelihood, we can tell the hospital if at the first day of the Corona patient being hospitalized, if this patient is going to become severe or not, right? So all of a sudden we know which people are actually going to become more significant. One of the questions that people are asking here, that the name Kahoon, K-A-H-U-N, and the reason for this name is that Kahoon is an ancient city in Egypt. And it's the first city that the papyrus paper were actually invented, right? So they were the first one to take knowledge and convert that into something written. And Kahoon is the first one to take a textbook or text information and convert that into data. And so this is something that we have seen today in the hospitals in Israel that are starting to use that, because when you know the first day that this particular patient is going to become, or very likely that this patient is going to become more severe, and this patient is not, then you can start to separate them. And so this is another company that is enjoying the tailwind. Dynamo is actually in remote education, or actually mobile education, or education technology space, and trying to address a bigger problem, right? So the triangle between parents, children, and smartphones, that is this triangle, there is a lot of frustrations, right? So most of the parents for small kids tend to think that their kids spend too much time with the smartphone. And most of the kids obviously don't like that this is what their parents think of. And we have tried to address this problem, and we have created an app that not only, so this is more of an education, education application that kids are learning stuff, right? And they're learning stuff from school, they're learning stuff from anywhere that they want, but they are learning new things every day. In fact, in average 25 times a day. And the parents are actually getting some statistics and feedbacks on what exactly the kids are learning and which areas they actually need the improvement and so forth. And all of a sudden changing something that is all evil, the smartphones for the kids, into something that is actually valuable. So these companies are actually enjoying quite a lot of tailwind. Other companies that Seetree is in agriculture technology space, and we all realize that agriculture is nearly the only sector that is not being affected by the coronavirus, right? So no one is going to shut down a farm because of the coronavirus, right? Otherwise, we will die with no food. So the reality is that Seetree enjoys sort of tailwind, or a little bit of tailwind, but definitely not headwind. And what Seetree does is actually building, I would say, a smart information system for farmers that are growing trees, right? And today, if you ask yourself, okay, if you have a farm with 1 million trees, what do you know about the trees? The reality is that you don't know anything. And so we have drones flying over a plantation of trees, and at the level of a single tree can tell the farmer if this tree is healthy or not. And if not, what is the issue? Maybe it's water stress, maybe nutrition, disease, pests, whatever, and actually create a complete actionable plan for the farmer to go ahead and improve the yield of the plantation, and this turns out to be pretty significant. So this is a little bit about of my startups. Obviously, I have more, but I'm not going to discuss all of them. The framework that I've built over time is actually sort of it's defined as a venture capital firm, but it's actually the business model is of a company builder, right? So I'm not looking for a deal flow of new companies. I actually create my own, and I'm using this vehicle in order to fund them and help them to grow. And this is what I'm doing these days.
And another company, whenever I hear about your companies, I'm like, gee, of course. How come I didn't think about that? They have interesting stories. There's also another interesting story about when you said about a company that, when you go to the garage and you don't know what the hell they're doing, and you're like, am I being screwed right now? I mean, are they charging, pardon my French, are they charging me too much for something I don't know anything of? So that was another idea.
So yeah, there is more. There is like when you travel to Europe and you buy goods, you're actually entitled to get the VAT back, right? When you try to do that, you simply see that it doesn't work, right? Because there is always bad things happen there. Maybe there are long lines at the customs. Maybe there are, the store does not have the right forms, or something bad goes there. And we have built that in an app that all you have to do is scan the receipt, scan the boarding pass, scan your passport, and get your money back. As simple as that. Now, the reality is that many of my startups are actually dealing with a point of frustration, right? And this is pretty important for me because this is easier to engage users if they feel the same frustration, right? If I will tell you, okay, I started Waze because I hate traffic jams, right? And everyone hates traffic jams, right? And I started many of my startups because I ran into a situation and I told myself, wait a minute, it cannot be the situation, right? There's something wrong here. And so in many cases that will be a consumer problem, maybe losing money, leaving money on the table, wasting time, and so forth. And many of them are exactly like that, right? But each one of them is dealing with very specific problem that I'm trying to address, and each one of them is trying to become successful in its own way to actually make an impact. Right at the end of the day, entrepreneurs, the only thing that they're looking is make an impact.
And when I remember from your lectures about Waze, there's one principle that not too many people know. In Waze, it was good enough, a principle that you like to talk about. Being good enough makes you win. Can you explain that? And is that the same thing with your other companies? Are you going after that same strategy of, you know what, we don't need to be the best, we need to be in the right place to not invest too much and yet conquer the market?
No, this is a combination of multiple things, right? So building a startup is a journey of failures, right? Because in reality, you're trying to do something new that no one did before, and you want to believe that you know exactly what you're doing, but you don't. So you try one thing and it doesn't work. You try another thing and it doesn't work, and another thing and it doesn't work, until you find one thing that does work. And then when you do, it only buys you the ticket for the next part of the journey, right? And so always, the first part of the journey is always going to be product market fit. Let's see that I can build something that creates value. If I'm unable to create value, then I will die. If you're able to create value, then you will figure out the next phase of it. So how do I grow? How do I make money out of it? And so forth. But for a second, I want you to think about product market fit as the most important part of this journey of a startup. Right? In fact, you never heard of a startup that did not figure out product market fit. And you only hear about them after they figure out product market fit. Now, here's the more interesting part of it. Companies don't change their product market fit after they figure that out, right? So I want you to think about all the applications that you're using on a regular basis and ask yourself, what is the difference between each one of those applications today and the first time that you have used it? And the answer is that there is no difference. Right? You're searching Google today the same way that you've searched Google for the first time. You're using Netflix today the same way that you have used Netflix for the same time. You're using Waze today the same way, and so forth. And the reality is that once you figure out product market fit, you don't change the value proposition. In order to get there, it's a journey of failures. And the more interesting part is that in order to become successful, you need to simply make more attempts. Now, in order to make more attempts, you need to fail fast, which basically says start with something that is not ready, start with something that is not even good enough, and start to collect feedbacks from users and improve that, right? So you start with something that is way below average or below acceptable level, and then you get feedback and you fix that, and you get feedback and you fix that, and you get feedbacks and you fix that until you get to the level of good enough. When you are good enough, you are going to win the market. The best example is Gmail, right? We can think of Waze as well, but Gmail is exactly 15 years old, and everyone is using Gmail today. There is not even a single person that I know that is not using Gmail. Now, the reality is that when Gmail started, it was not good enough. It was free, and over time it becomes good enough. And when you are good enough and free, no one can compete with you in the market. And this is Waze, this is Gmail, this is many applications. This is and the reality is that you think about it and you say, okay, if you try to build something perfect, you are going to lose the market to someone that is good enough. In order to get to good enough, you start with not good enough, and you do iteration and iteration and iteration until it becomes good enough. So in that sense, the biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be good enough. And in order to get there, you need to start with making a lot of mistakes and making them fast.
Interesting. Now, I see here a question, Uri, without showing too much, did this pandemic give you new ideas for new startups related to healthcare?
So I think that the challenge is that when you look at the bigger scope, is that the system was not ready. And the system was not ready means that the biggest scare or the biggest concern was that what if the hospitals will collapse? What if you will go to the hospital and there is no available bed or an available ventilation system for you? And I think that one of the results is that this is going to lead into better preparation for the next pandemic. Now, here's the challenge: the next pandemic is going to be different. So it's unclear even that the investments that we will make today will be sufficient for, or will be even at the right direction for the next one. So this is one part. The other part is that I think that the realization that, and this is in general, I would say, in the entire health system, ask yourself, when is it that we are going to the doctor, right? When we are going to the doctor, it's when we are sick. Now, the being ill it might be an indication for something completely different. And then usually we deal with the illness, and we are dealing it maybe when it's too late. I think that with better understanding throughout the lifestyle and throughout the overall behavior and throughout taking, for a second I would call that biometric, but taking vital biometrics on a constant level, I think that that this is going to become one of the biggest challenges that we will see in the next future. Now, to answer the question, am I going to start a new startup today? No, but maybe later this year.
Now, I wanted to ask you, are all entrepreneurs crazy? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you see...
Yes, don't worry, yes.
I know your passion. I mean, everybody have crazy passions, right? when you, and I know people sometimes look at great stories, but bad management, and sometimes great management and bad stories, but they'll still invest because they like the management. When you're looking at what you're seeking in the management of those companies and the people behind them, you're looking probably for passion. I mean, your passion, not too many people, I don't know how many know, is right behind you. I don't know if you know, Uri goes skiing, I think on some of the most dangerous mountains known to man. And that's part of it, of being an entrepreneur. It's somehow connected, each one with his own crazy thing, right?
It's building a startup is a roller coaster journey, right? And it's a journey of failures. So if you don't like roller coaster, if you don't like extreme sports, if you don't like to be in a situation that that there is 2 crises per day, then startup is not for you. Right? At the end of the day, there is a requirement of very special characteristics of people, that their passion are much bigger than their fear of failures to go ahead and build a startups, right? And I'm like that because in reality, I do not afraid to fail, right? And I actually know that, and this is interesting, by the way, just saying, the likelihood of second-time entrepreneur to become successful is 5 times higher than first-time entrepreneur, regardless what happened in the first journey. Right? So it doesn't matter if you were successful or not. The journey itself makes you so much more ready for the next one. And the more that you are doing, you simply become better and better and better in doing that.
And it's interesting, you know, I want to get out of here also with some details nobody knows about you because they're unrelated to anything but who you are. And what's your favorite film? What's your favorite music? It's things I never asked you, and maybe this is the right forum to ask you.
So music is interesting, right? And I actually look at it, and I still like the same music that I did when I was teenager, right? So classic rock in that sense. Now here's the challenge. I speak with other people, and turns out that each one of them remain associated or remain linked to the same music that they liked when they were teenagers. And we don't change that often. And so in that sense, I'm like everyone else. I'm just born in the 60s, right? So when I was a teenager, that was late 70s, and this is my music. There is actually another question from Alexandra about technology transfer, which I would like to answer. Look, for me, the journey of a startup starts with a problem, right? So it's always about solving a problem. And here's what happened, right? I start with a problem, and then I ask myself, so who has this problem, right? If you happen to be the only person on the planet with this problem, then go to a shrink. It's going to be so much cheaper than building a startup. But if a lot of people have this problem, then go and understand their perception of the problem, and only then go and build the solution. If you follow this path, it's guaranteed that if you're successful with your solution, you create value. If you start with the solution, you might end up with building something that no one cares. And this is really frustrating. So for me, it's never about technology. It's about solving problems. I will be using technology in order to address those problems, but I'm not building technology for the sake of technology. Now, obviously, there are others that will do that, right? And so there are others that are basically saying, okay, this is very unique technology. I'm going to build that, and then I'm going to figure out what to do with it, but not me.
Great. So Uri, another question came up. What is the most important quality you look for with your various startup CEOs, which is basically what I asked before regarding the management,
right?
People, what they're made out of.
And so at the end of the day, what I will say is that there are probably, 4, 5, maybe 6 different behaviors that I would like to see with a CEO in order to engage, right? And the first one is the perseverance, right? So the attitude of never giving up, right? Now, this is interesting because if you would ask someone, they will tell you, I will never give up, right? This is the easy answer, but how do you know that this is in reality like that? And I will answer that later. How do I know that my CEOs actually have these behaviors? So this is the first one. The second one is making hard decisions. Making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard, and I'm looking for that. I'm looking for a CEO that is able to make hard decisions. I'm looking for CEO that listening to their customers, right, or their users, whatever it is. And this is very different in the approach than CEOs that don't listen. And I'm looking for someone that can adapt fast. And this is, in that sense, making mistakes fast, or actually realizing that this is a mistake and changing behavior. And this is, and the reality is that half of the CEOs are people that I know from before. So I knew before we even started that they're actually going to have these skills and behaviors that I expect. The rest of them, I engage and mentor them for a long period of time before I decide to engage, because I need to see those behaviors in order to say, this is someone that I'm going to go the long journey and the challenging journey of building a startup and becoming successful at the end. So this is part. Now, this is very different than I would say other investors, right, in that sense, because most of the other investors are basically saying, okay, we like the CEO, we don't like the CEO, we're doing a little bit of due diligence, but they're not working with the CEO for a long period of time until they decide that this is the right CEO to invest. And so, and choosing the right CEO is probably the most significant factor of success.
Very interesting. So Uri, I guess my last question would be, how do people get in touch with you in case they would want to get involved with some of your companies and what you're doing these days? I know you're working with friends and family, but perhaps this is something that could be a good fit for some of our families, because basically those that are on this call are basically families that I think some might find it relevant.
So this is very simple. I just sent my email in the Q&As. I actually will do that in the chat. So this is going to be available for everyone, I think. And this is very easy to reach out for me because I do answer all of my emails, right? And not necessarily the answers that you would like to have, but all of them. And that maybe will make it easier for everyone to access. And look, I'm always looking for interesting people that can help my startups, people that want to invest in startups, to join my journey and help me to help them to become more successful.
How can we finish this call without a great question that is, what is your biggest failure?
So yet to be seen, right? Because I plan more failures in the future than I had before. I would say that there are a few startups that I started and shut them down, and the most disappointing one where the CEO was not the right one. That was kind of personal failure, personal slap on the face that I missed that, right? And the reality is that after that, I ask, so people ask me whether or not I'm going to repeat that, and I say, look, here is my model, right? In my model, I'm very unlikely to repeat that, but I will repeat that. I will have more failures like that, and each one of them is actually very painful. Other startups that I shut down over the years were actually sometimes I looked at them as the right decision, or I look at them as the right decision throughout the entire journey, right? Because we had underlying assumptions that we tried to validate, and we realized that these underlying assumptions are wrong, right? And so you start with that, and you basically say, okay, there's no reason to continue if the underlying assumptions are wrong. Part of it, one example was we try to build a platform for group buying, right? And so you think of Groupon maybe over the years, and I will tell you, Groupon is not group buying, it's group selling. And group buying means that I want to buy something. Let's say I would like to buy this cup, and if I will find more people that would like to buy the same cup, then maybe I can get a discounted price, right? And the reality is that we open up a platform that people can say, this is what I would like to buy, and go into the social network of their own friends and ask their friends if they want to join a group buying of this product. And then the product or the platform will actually ask for providers to bid for this. Turns out that people don't know what they want. So imagine that you go to a restaurant, and these days when the restaurants are closed, we actually really need to imagine that. But imagine that you go to a restaurant and you ask for a menu and you get a blank page, right, and a pen. And they tell you, write whatever you want, and the chef will make it for you. We don't know what we want. And this turns out to be the underlying assumption that people would know what they want was simply wrong. And so this is you know, one of the failures that I look at it and I say this was actually pretty good failure. We validated the underlying assumptions relatively cheap, relatively fast, but betting on the wrong CEO, I hate that.
Thank you very much, Uri. This has been a fascinating discussion. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, you know, we need to find a way that we can actually do these and get more feedback from the people. So maybe for me to see the rest of the people would be easier to do that, because I don't see them, right? I don't see the rest of the people. And I know that they are there, but I don't see them, I don't hear them, more challenging.
Someone else asked, where can we get Uri's email address? Uri wrote it in the, just before your remark, you see Uri's email address. And anyway, you can reach out to us in case you don't have it, and we'll be happy to do the intro or send you his email. And yeah, and I guess that's that.
Best, there's one more question I see here. Best skiing resort, the next one.
I didn't see that. Where is that? Oh, yeah. So thank you very much, Uri. It's been fascinating. Next week, I'm speaking to somebody you know, Dov Moran, another exceptional entrepreneur that invented the flash drive, the disk on key, and I think they sold for like $1.7 billion, one of the most impressive exits. Great. So thank you very much. I wish for everybody to stay safe. Uri, thank you for being with us for over an hour.
Thank you.
And hopefully we will see you everyone soon next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.